This is me with my family circa 1984. Notice the feathered hair and the shiny gloss on the photograph. We're a happy family, for the most part. My parents love each other, and my brother and I enjoy an ease in our relationship that's still present with us today. This is me before the first blooms of adolescence. And here I am at 12 with my best friend Stephanie. It's Halloween, and we're having a blast. My mother sewed our costumes, and we wore them proudly. My primary concerns are what we think and say and do in our peer group. In the 7th grade, I joined a girls' organization called Job's Daughters, and this social group will be my primary activity and focus for everything outside of school until I finish high school. I'm an excellent student, active in my church youth group, and I have a circle of good friends. These things protect me from the grief and suffering that arrived my first year of high school. In the winter of 1989, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. She'd had cancer a decade earlier and survived, but now it had returned. For the next 2.5 years, she would fight it, but in June of 1991, she would lose her life, and my adolescence, as such, would end. I remember clearly that the night my mama died, we went to a baseball game. Betty, the hospice nurse, had been at our house for 3 days now. My dad wanted to get us out of the house. We were worn thin with the anticipation of grief. I was so numb by then. For months now, I had lived with a certain knowledge of her imminent death. Leering at me from the corners of my consciousness, the knowing stood, ready to pounce. I went through the motions of living, school, homework, talking on the phone with friends, making plans for the future. But really, we were just waiting. And yet we never spoke of it as a family, never spoke of what life would be like after. Never spoke of how much we would miss her. So my daddy took us to the game that night. The Oakland A's, nosebleed seats at the Coliseum. It was June and the night was warm. I was 17 when she passed away. A girl woman perched on the edge of adulthood. It's been 23 years now. I've lived longer without her than I lived with her. I look back on that girl that I was. She had to be so brave. A long time ago I read that everything happens for a reason, and that sometimes things happen that interrupt the story of who you think you are and set you on a whole new trajectory. And my lived experience tells me that the second part is true. There are things that interrupt the story of who you think you are and set yourself on a brand new trajectory. I understand suffering and grief because I've walked through it, and it allows me to meet others in their suffering too, even when the contents of their suffering is radically different. Resilience and sensitivity are often born from adversity, and I'm grateful for those gifts. But I will stop short of linking suffering with redemption, for to do so does harm to her memory and all that she stood for, and also all that I seek to strive for in my own adulthood.